Okay, we're gonna get started today sewing our point shoes. The first thing you're gonna want to do is to take your ribbons and cut them into 4 equal strips. You're gonna do that by first cutting it in half, then cutting each of those in half again. Then to finish off our ribbons, you're gonna take a lighter or matches. You're gonna wanna burn the edges simply, if my lighter will work. This will prevent them from fraying in the future. You can also go ahead and do this to one side of your elastics. So your elastics may have come in 2 pieces, or they might need to be cut. This one's pretty long. She's not gonna need all of it. That's why I only did one side, so we can trim it to where it needs to be. But we'll do that later after we try it on. So our ribbons are burned and our elastic is burned. We're gonna take our shoe, and first we're gonna find where we're gonna sew our ribbons. We're gonna take the heel of the shoe and actually push it down into the shank to create kind of a crease on each side. From there, you can take a pen and just do a little line on each side so that you know where to sew your ribbons. So from there, our ribbons are actually gonna go just in front of that mark. So we're gonna start, and you'll see there's a shiny side to your ribbon and a little bit duller side. The duller side is gonna go in towards their foot, so the shiny side will go out to the outside. We're gonna take it and just tuck it under a little bit to give us a clean edge. And then this will go right here about an inch or so down. You're gonna take your dental floss and your needle and tie an end down at the end. I've already done that, as you can see. So I'm gonna start this by going right here underneath the drawstring. It's important that you don't start through the drawstring, then the dancer won't be able to change that. For our first thing, looks like my knot is a little too small, so I'm gonna redo that. And for our first stitch, we're gonna go ahead and go all the way through the shoe just to make sure we get it really anchored in there. All right, that should be better. So we're gonna go through here to get it anchored in. And then we'll go right back real close into the ribbon. From here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a thing called a whip stitch. So you'll see that your shoe has the pink satin on the outside, and then it actually has this canvas lining. If you'll see, you can point them, or you can pull them across like that. From here on out, we're gonna try to just sew through the lining. Let's give us a prettier look, so that if we get these on stage or in for pictures, you won't see that whole stitch on the outside. So our whip stitch, we're gonna start from the outside. We're gonna catch the lining just on the outside of the ribbon and then go back through. So it's basically like you're sewing a circle around the sides of the ribbon. We're gonna do that all the way down the side. The nice part about doing it on the inside as well is that you don't really have to worry about how pretty it is, because no one will see it. As long as it's good and secure, you're all set. Now, once you get to the bottom, we have 2 options. It might be easiest to just go ahead and keep doing that same whip stitch all the way around, or you can simply do a basting stitch to hold it down at the bottom. So if you were to do a whip stitch, you'd continue the same method we just did all the way across this bottom. To do just your basting stitch, you're gonna go here. This can sometimes be a little bit harder to just catch the lining. So if they're having trouble just catching the lining, go ahead and just have them keep doing that whip stitch. So then that takes us to the other side. So I'm going to turn the shoe around, and I'm going to continue whip stitching now that we're back to the other side, all the way up just like I did. So repeat the process. Oh, and if they do catch that, no big deal. They just want to make sure that they don't catch and go around their ribbon, because then they won't be secure and they'll have a lot of extra thread in there. This one can sometimes be a little bit trickier depending on your child's shoe. Or your shoe, sorry for my dancers that are following along. If they hit into that seam right here, you'll just have to go through. That's why you want to make sure you have a thicker needle so you have some power and it doesn't bend behind you. Now, just like on the other side, when we get up to the top, we want to make sure to stop below that drawstring so that they'll still be able to tighten those if they need to. Okay, from here, when we go across the top, we do have to do a basting stitch at this point because we're not on the end, so we can't go around it. So this one may take a little bit more effort to just get a few in there. Don't need a ton of stitches, just enough to hold it down so that it's not pulling away from the top of the shoe. Then once you get down there, you're just going to tie it off. Now this can be a little bit trickier with the dental floss. You're going to make sure you have some good scissors to cut them off. The littler scissors don't quite do it as well. So now you'll see she has one ribbon sewn. We're going to go ahead, we'll take another ribbon, do the exact same thing on the other side. For the elastics, we're going to take that side that we had burned the edges. For these, we're going to actually sew them on the outside. I like to sew them right here on the outside of the seam. It'll help keep them on our heel. We can use the same dental floss. For this one, we are sewing on the outside, so you're going to see it. Don't worry about it. You want to make your stitches maybe a little bit prettier, but especially for our first pair, we're not going on stage or taking too many pictures in them yet, so it shouldn't be that big of an issue. It will be a little bit trickier to sew through the elastic as it is thicker, but the nice part is you don't have to worry as much about it fraying. So we'll sew this one side. So instead of sewing exactly even, I'm going to take it and just do a little bit of an angle so that when it lays around her foot, it'll be a little bit easier. I'm going to start on the inside, underneath that drawstring again. And then I'm just going to actually start with my whip stitches. When you're going through the elastic and through this back seam, it is a little bit tougher, and it may be necessary for them to use a thimble if they need a little extra support to get all the way through. You can also pin your elastic in place. If you see mine's kind of turning a little bit, and especially for our newer sewers, it's probably going to want to pin it so that they don't have to keep moving it as much as I am right now to hold it in place. All right, so then from there, I'm going to demonstrate this time how we would just keep going with that whip stitch. If they want to do that on their ribbons as well, like I said before, they can. For the elastic, you do want to go a little bit up into the elastic, just so you don't have any of it start to kind of come away and lose that. And I actually just did what I told him not to do, but I pulled a little too hard and my floss came right out of my needle. So you'll want to just rethread that. No big deal, you're still good to go. The reason we sew in a box is that these elastic and the ribbons are what's keeping the shoe on the foot. So we want to make sure they have as much support as necessary. If anything starts to get loose, it could be dangerous if those shoes start to slip around on the dancer's feet. So we want to make sure they're as stable as possible. The other thing you may notice as you go through some of the elastic is that your needle may get a little sticky. That's normal. I would just go ahead and wipe it off before you start sewing anything else, because it will kind of gunk up in there. But to do 1 or 2 elastics, it should be just fine. Then up this outside, you'll see this side is longer because we did sew on an angle. I'm actually just going to space these out a little bit more. Should be pretty good. There's nothing wrong with doing more stitches. It'll just be that much more secure. But for time's sake, I'm going to go a little bit wider here. Now the easiest thing across the top here is just to do a few basting stitches, and I would just go through all the way through the shoe this time, since we're already going to the outside, and just double check that you're not going into that drawstring. The reason we put our elastic on the outside is so they don't irritate that Achilles tendon. We don't want the dancers changing anything about their form. That could be dangerous and actually risk some injury of that Achilles tendon if they're not doing everything exactly right. So then we'll tie it off just like we did with our ribbons. Lost my needle there. And cut that off. Then you'll be all set to do the other side. So what you want to do is actually put the point shoe on, take this across, and you don't want it to be loose. So you do want to have some tension in it as it wraps to the other side. But you don't want it to be so tight that it's cutting into the ankle at all. Tight enough to keep it on the heel, but not tight enough that it's creating a mark or anything. Then you'll sew that and your other ribbon, and you will actually be good to go. So see, if I were to do this, it should probably be approximately this big, depending on the dancer's arch, the width of their ankle, things like that. It's going to be somewhere in that range, but so you'll cut it off right there. You might even have some extra, which don't throw it away. Go ahead and keep it in your point shoe bag, because every once in a while we need to use some extra elastic, especially for our dancers with more flexible feet. So having that in there will get us about 1 step ahead of the ball game. So once they're done with that, they can finish this shoe, move on to the other one, and they're ready for class.